Hey guys, I just kind of wanted to come on before we start this podcast and let you guys know that we are absolutely still figuring out the best way to do this for you guys. This is our first episode, and so there might be some difficulties with the best quality of sound. And also, as we continue to go on, there absolutely will be changes in the forum and the layout that we have in this podcast. We want to make it the best listening experience for you. And we're just trying to figure out what best works for us as we record this. And also before this episode, I do want to give a warning that we're going to be discussing some heavier topics, specifically eating disorders in this episode. We want to be as authentic as possible and make sure that this is as transparent as it can possibly be, which I know might be hard for some listeners. And so we wanted to just give a warning before we do so. And we're going to get into the podcast now. Thanks for listening.
Hey, friend.
Hi, I'm Abby.
I'm Emily. Welcome to our first episode of our podcast.
Yeah. This is going to be we want to introduce ourselves to start out this podcast just so that you can know our stories and know us better as we kind of grow together and share our lives on this podcast. We want you to have context, background, all the things so that as we walk through things spiritually and through our lives, it's not kind of without any testimony behind it. So I guess this first podcast is going to be my story. And then we're going to do Emily's story next. But I think we should do just a little bit about ourselves first. Maybe like a little overall.
Sure.
To get a vibe. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm a college student. I'm going into my junior year of college currently. And I'm a newlywed as of May of this year.
Whoop, whoop.
I am going through college life, obviously, and working on finding a career, what I want to do. All the great internship things, and trying to figure out how to be a godly friend, a godly wife, just a godly woman overall.
I'm Emily. I am a stay-at-home mom of 3 little tots. I have been married to my husband. August will be 5 years, actually.
Wow,
I know. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, and I am just trying to figure out the rhythm of really being a godly mom to my children and discipling them well, and also being a godly wife, a godly friend, and just a godly woman in today's society, and really kind of walking in the Word.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I think before we start, we're going to pray.
Yeah.
Do you want to pray or you want me to?
Go ahead, girl. You got it.
Okay, great. I'll pray. Just to ask the Lord to bless over this. Lord, we just thank you so much for just the opportunity to have friendships in our lives that we can do this with. I just pray that you would bring your blessing upon this, God. I pray that this would touch anybody, somebody, whoever might be listening to this podcast right now. I ask that you would just lay your hand on them and allow our stories to encourage them and bring insight into their lives. I pray, God, that you will just strengthen us as we go throughout this journey of learning together and sharing our lives. I pray that you would just allow this to be a fruitful ministry. No matter who listens, God, allow this to be truly an act of worship to you and just doing our part in sharing the gospel through our stories. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right, great. Guess we're going to get started.
I'm so excited.
Me too.
I think this was the first time I've heard bits and pieces of your testimony.
Yeah.
But to actually read it, I'm really excited to hear it.
I know when I wrote this out and I sent it to you and you were like, whoo. And I was like, you've heard it. What do you mean?
I don't know. There were either details or just like little snippets. And plus I know you a lot more.
Yeah.
So it's very different.
This is definitely the extended version because I wanted it to be able to. Typically I do the footnotes version when we're in small group, but yeah. I definitely wanted this to be a full tell all. I'm really nervous because, well, I don't know that my mom's ever going to hear this, but like my family knows like not half of this. So anyways, I'm really excited though.
Yeah.
So this is going to be great.
It's going to be fruitful for sure. So
yeah,
I'm excited.
Me too. So let's just hop right in, I guess. I was born into a Christian family. I was born in 2005 and I grew up in a very small town. I was fortunate enough to be raised by a really godly grandmother, and her influence in my life is something I will always remember. She was such a great grandmother to me and made sure that I had good Christian values. But my mom and dad were working, so she watched me every day until I went to school, and she kept me after school even then. So my mom and dad were married. They got married after 3 months of knowing each other, which is crazy. But anyways, so they were married for a really long time, and they were pretty much the perfect couple at church from the outside. My dad was a deacon. My mom was in charge of like the children's stuff and everything. And I was fortunate enough to be raised in a great church with great community, and I was saved in 2011 at 6 years old. To be fair, my dad was never dad of the year, even though he put on that persona from the outside. He was definitely the kind of person that would go to work all day and then expect like dinner to be on the table, but he didn't want to be bothered once he sat in his recliner at the end of the day. So it was more so like, okay, Dad, good night. And that's really the extent of our relationship. I don't remember like too much of it, but mostly my older siblings do. In the 4th grade, my mom caught my dad cheating, not for the first time, but for the first time that the children were aware of. I'm not exactly sure how many times he was caught cheating before that, but I do specifically remember, I think my mom picked me up from school, and I thought that was really weird because my aunt worked at the school, and so she would take me home from school every day. And so I thought it was really weird that my mom picked me up. And I remember, sorry, this is kind of funny. I remember having to do one of those shoebox dioramas for class. And my parents were arguing. They never argued in front of the kids, first of all. We never saw them argue. They were very, like, united front, which was, I guess, good. Anyway, I needed a shoebox to make this diorama, and my mom was like, go away, like, not right now. And I was like, okay, fine. So I went to my room. Then they brought us into the living room and told us that my dad cheated. Which is not funny, but it was just, anyway, really core memory.
Never asking for a shoebox ever again.
I know, for real. It was crazy. But I do specifically remember that I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see my dad again, which was kind of a really scary feeling as a 4th grader. But I also specifically remember that day my dad cried with us, which was like something I'll never forget, because I remember my 4th grade brain being like, well, if you did the wrong, like, why are you crying? Like, why are you sitting here crying with it? I guess I will never know the answer to that, but that's okay. So a few days later, he moved back. Actually, I don't think he left that time. I think this is really tricky. I'm having a hard time remembering the timeline. So they separated for a few days. I think my dad went away for a few days, and then he came back to take care of the kids, and my mom went to her parents' house for a few days. I'm pretty sure that's how it went. And then he came back. They like came back together, and they never like fully separated that time. But I remember my dad was like trying really, really hard to like spoil my mom. Like Christmas that year was huge for her. He made it like a really big deal. It seemed like he was trying really hard. We went to Disneyland, like pulling out all the stops pretty much to, I guess, put up that perfect front again. It was a great year, but it was kind of weird. Whatever. I got Disneyland out of it.
There you go.
So the second time my dad left, I was in 5th grade. So this was only like a year had lapsed since then. And I knew it happened because my mom picked me up from school again. And I got in the car and I was like, he cheated again, didn't he? Like, I specifically remember her asking that. And then when I got home, my dad, he had a work van at the time because he worked for my uncle's company, and he'd take the van home. And he was loading all of his stuff into that van. And I guess I felt like a need to have solidarity with my mom, so I refused to speak to him. When I got there, I just walked. I guess I was kind of scared to speak to him too, because again, we weren't very close. So he moved in with my uncle, which is like only 2 miles away. So I ignored my dad out of spite. So on Sundays, my siblings would go spend time with him. On like Sundays after church, they would go hang out with him. All of my sisters are in high school, and my brother is like mid-20s by that point, because he's a lot older than me. So I felt the need to like not talk to him and be my mom's like buddy with that. And then I think maybe a few weeks into that, I was like, okay, fine, I'll go hang out. But I was like, I'm still going to be mad at him for my mom. But after that, I began to spend 1 day a week with him over the summer. And then he also started to take me to school, because my aunt was picking me up for school because she worked there. But then I moved into 6th grade where she didn't work. So I wasn't able to ride with her anymore. However, in all that, my mom got like really, really depressed, like dropped like 60 pounds depressed. It was really, really bad. And I remember that Christmas after my dad officially left, she was like too depressed to go gift shopping. So my grandpa gave us money individually. She gave us money. And then one of my adopted sister's aunts had sent us money that year. She had never done it before, never did it again. But anyway, so we got money for Christmas and that's it. And then she just took us to the mall. Like, she was just so, so sad, depressed. So she wouldn't eat and she would sleep I just remember her sleeping all the time, to the point where my oldest sister, she dropped out of college and then took care of me and my sisters pretty much. She even like told me that I didn't recognize this, but my mom was too depressed to like go to the grocery store. And my sister was too afraid to like ask her, so she would just use her check to like get us whatever we needed at the time. I guess I was too young to really recognize how bad it was, but like growing up and then talking to my sister about it, it was like not the best situation. She did get better. My dad still took me to school, and then I spent Sundays after church with him. And I think this is actually kind of good for our relationship. I think me and my sister talk about this a lot, that I do think ultimately him leaving was better than him staying there and us never having a relationship, because after he left, he was kind of forced to spend time with us.
Yeah.
Or like if he wanted to see us, he had to put some effort in. Whether it be like taking us to the movies or asking to come pick us up, he had to put in some sort of effort. And I think in the long run, that maybe was better for our relationship. Because if they would have stayed married forever, I think he would have just taken it for granted that we were always there and kind of just another responsibility. I don't think he would have ever realized that, hey, like I do need to put effort into my relationship with my children. So I ultimately think it was like for the best. However, you might think my parents were divorced. They were not. They never got divorced. And that's because my mom truly still does believe, that God had told her not to divorce my dad. And as I get older, I realize like kind of the beauty in that, like that she kind of recognized that her vow to God was more important than her vow to my dad, which I think takes a lot of maturity and wisdom to be like, I'm not gonna just divorce him out of anger. I'm gonna like stick by his side. And I remember she really stuck to that story in the Bible about the guy that was forced to marry a prostitute. Like, she clung onto that really hard. And I think she had fully convinced herself that he was gonna come, like the prodigal son, like he was gonna come running back. And my dad never filed, I guess, because he just didn't want to deal with it. I think he just thought he could like just do what he wants, and it didn't really matter because he was still dating whoever he had cheated on my mom with, and so it didn't really matter to him. But around 8th grade, this is a kind of a big jump in the story. So I guess this was all throughout middle school, just kind of my parents being separated. And it kind of felt normal at some point, just like the routine of it all. I got used to my parents being separated, so it was fine. It didn't really, I guess, bother me that I knew of. But around 8th grade, kind of unexpected events happened, which kind of like changed my life forever in a weird way. My sisters and my mom and I went on a trip to Orlando for the weekend, but it was like right before 8th grade started, the weekend right before. And my sister was pregnant, but only 28 weeks pregnant. And she went into labor down there, which absolutely was a God thing, because that happens to be the best NICU center in all of America. So like in Orlando is the best place for a NICU baby to be born, which is like absolutely God. I guess if he was going to be born prematurely, that was the best place for it to be. So she ended up having the baby there. So my dad came and picked me up from Orlando because I had to go to school. And my mom ended up living in Orlando. And this is important because I had to move in with my grandma because my dad and my uncle lived together. It was not fit for like a middle school child. It was just a man house, as you can imagine. So I had to move in with my grandma. And somewhere in all of that, I guess I just got really stressed out without realizing it because I was nervous to be going into a new grade and starting school, and all these changes were happening around me. And also I was like talking to some guy in middle school. That's so irrelevant now, but it stressed me out at the time because he was definitely talking to multiple girls at once, and I thought I had to prove something. I thought I had to be the chosen girl. I say all that to say I was really stressed at the time, which ended up leading to me starting to throw up my food because I was so stressed. And the first time it happened, I think it was the first day of 8th grade, my grandma had made me breakfast and I was like, I just don't feel good. And I threw up and I felt better. And so I went to school because I was like, oh, okay, well, I don't really know what that was. But I'm good now. So I just went to school. And slowly it just started to happen more and more. I would notice specifically, I guess when I was in large groups of people, I guess it made me anxious because when I would go to dinner or when I'd about to be going to an event or like hanging out with friends, I would throw up my food. And I also have a really twisted sense of humor, and so does my family. And so it kind of became a joke in a weird, it's not a joke to me anymore, in a really weird twisted way that I was bulimic because I couldn't keep my food down. And I also don't know what in my middle school brain liked the attention of that and the validation. But I think, I don't know. Anyways, I dropped like 30 pounds in the span of a few months just from being unable to keep my food down. And I went to the doctor, and I don't go to this doctor anymore. I changed doctors. She pretty much told me that like my BMI was still great and it was probably acid reflux, and she gave me like omeprazole, which ultimately, yes, it did fix the problem because it just deprived my stomach of all acid. I couldn't throw up, but it was an anxiety problem. It was definitely not an acid reflux problem.
Yeah.
And anyways, yeah, not the greatest pediatrician, whatever. But when I got prescribed the acid reflux medication, my mom would stay on top of me to take it. Because obviously when I was throwing up my food involuntarily, I would complain about feeling sick all the time. And so she would like try to make sure I was taking the medicine every day. And I stopped throwing up my food, which is great. And I thought that it would like make me feel relieved, because it's definitely not fun to throw up everything you eat. But I also was going into the 9th grade, and soon after the pandemic hit, I was like feeling normal. So I stopped throwing up in 8th grade. Going into 9th grade, the pandemic happened. And as you can imagine, sitting in a house all the time is not great for your health. And I started to gain weight, but like not an unhealthy amount, because you have to keep in mind, I was like maybe 95 pounds at the current height I am now, because I haven't grown in a while. And so it probably wasn't a bad idea for me to put weight on, But I also grew to like love the validation of people saying I was so tiny, and kind of just talking about it as if it gave me a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
To have this anxiety problem. So yeah, I'm going to take a break though from like the whole plot line so that I can also talk about my spiritual life, because I don't want this to just be a timeline of my, like, what's all the events in my life, because also I did have a spiritual walk through this. I was going to church, but the pandemic kind of put a kink in that. I do remember though, we were the live stream hymn singers for my Baptist church at the time. I really need to go find these to like show someone, because my mom had also taken in a mom and 2 children that were the victim of not physical abuse, but every other kind of abuse. And she was leaving her husband, and they moved in with us mere months before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And so as it hit, we were locked in together.
Yeah.
So it was me and my mom, one of my sisters, the sister that had the baby in Orlando, and the mom of those 2 children. We were all in the same house and we all sing. And so we somehow got recruited to be the singers. Whatever. This is so off topic.
I need to see that.
I'm so sorry. But I didn't. Yeah. There was harmonies. It was a real shebang. So yeah, we did go to church. And I would definitely say that it wasn't I liked church, but it wasn't, I don't think I would choose it on my own if it weren't for my mom taking me to church in that point in my life, probably just because of my mental state. I do know that I was saved and have always been saved, but I also know that I was like really lukewarm at that point in my spiritual walk. Just because I think everybody has a hard time going through middle school and high school. And I just didn't know who I was. Like, nobody knows who they are coming out of middle school.
No. Yeah.
And I also had all of my friends at church, because that's how I met everybody, was through church and my mom's friends. I was a lukewarm Christian probably because I was just surrounded in an environment of like friends who grew up in church and couldn't quite figure out their spiritual walk too. And it was definitely just the common theme of cultural Christianity in the South, I think, was starting to like sink in for me. And I was starting to realize that a lot of people were talking the talk and not walking the walk.
Yeah.
And it feels natural to your flesh to just join in with that unless you're actively fighting against it. Mm-hmm. Thankfully, I did have a mom that was teaching me those things and telling me those things. But it's hard to take value in them when you haven't had anything to like root you or force you to need to choose God.
Yeah.
Because I had been through hard things, but it wasn't bottom of the barrel, like on your knees crying things. So yeah, anyways. Again, like from 9th grade to maybe 11th grade, I would say my life was pretty boring, which might be kind of good. And then we get to senior year of high school, it was still great. I had a great time. I was really involved with like all things student. And so I had a great time in high school, and I had good friends. They weren't Christian friends per se, but they weren't also partying or like living lifestyle that was a terrible influence on me. So I'm very grateful for the friends that I had in high school. But in the winter of junior year, I think I started to feel the real body insecurity again, because again, as a teenager, you kind of just eat whatever you want and you don't really take care of your body in any sort of way. Mm-hmm. And as you get older and less active, like not playing outside anymore, not jumping on the trampoline, doing all the kid things anymore, your body does start to slow down and you'll show what you've been eating. And so I started to put on, I think, a little more weight than I had gained during COVID. And I was feeling really, really insecure about that. I was definitely past what I was pre, like, anxiety. I say disorder. I've never been diagnosed, but I'm self-diagnosing myself with an anxiety disorder. And I also was refusing to buy any bigger clothes for myself, which I think was probably the first like planted thought in my head of like, well, I have to fix this problem. And I also kind of understood that what had worked before. And ultimately that became my solution for that. But I also, specifically during winter break of my junior year, I tried to starve myself for the first time during that break. And I ultimately wasn't good at it and felt really disappointed in myself. I remember being really frustrated that I couldn't stick to it. Obviously, because your body needs food to survive.
Yeah.
And it's literally screaming at you to eat something, anything. And I remember being really upset at myself. And I do remember trying that quite a few times on that break. I think it was a few weeks. But I don't think this might be too much detail, but I don't think I ever made it past a day, thankfully, of me being able to do that. And so I did begin to remember what worked for me before, but I had never forced myself to throw up. And I tried that a few times on that break. But I'm thankfully I wasn't able to those few times that I tried. And again, I was upset at myself for that because I thought that I just wasn't dedicated enough to it or like wanting to lose weight. And so I remember feeling really sad. And ultimately, I ended up also watching. It was such a dark time. I ended up Googling or searching on TikTok, specifically skinny inspiration, to like force myself to like stay in that mind. I would look up model bodies because they're so unnaturally thin in some cases, just to like put something as a goal, be like, I'm gonna look like this. You have to stick to it or you're never gonna look like this type of mentality. But yeah, just for some context of kind of where I was mentally, I also, during that winter, I happened to start becoming closer friends with my now husband, which is kind of, I don't know, ironic. We were strictly friends at this point. Had known each other since 6th grade, but we had been in the same class for the past few years in theater, and we started to become a lot closer. We just started talking as friends and just really started to get to know each other over this break. I think that may have been kind of when I realized I liked him a little bit too. I'm not exactly sure the timeline on that, but I do know after break that year, I kind of gave up on my attempts to force myself into having an eating disorder in a weird way. But we also stayed friends. And I'm kind of going to skip ahead to like fall of my senior year. We were almost dating, me and my now husband. But I also was successful in figuring out how to make myself throw up and begin to skip meals. So I think kind of I would just not eat breakfast and force myself to go all day at school without eating. And then when I would get home, I would either eat in my room and not actually eat it, or kind of avoid making my plate in front of people and put so little food on it that it seemed as if I was eating, but like not enough to sustain me in any way. And probably I would go a few days without eating. And then on the weekends, specifically like when we would go out to eat or have any events with friends and stuff, I think I don't know if I would call it binging, but I would have a moment of like, this is my chance to indulge in anything. This is going to be my only chance for it to be worth it. And but however, when I would eat that much, it obviously made me sick because my body was used to eating nothing, and I would be able to then make myself throw it up after. And it was just kind of a really bad cycle I don't know how long this went on, but I do know that somewhere in that period, me and my husband started dating. But he kind of had an idea that I'd had an eating disorder before. I had explained to him that I had body image issues before, and he knew that I had thrown up food from anxiety before, but it had never been this bad, so he didn't know. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want anybody kind of interfering with that, and I hid it for maybe a few months. We started dating in September. I think October is when I finally just kind of had a breakdown, and I admitted it to him because I was acting off, obviously. And yeah, he was obviously concerned. And because we spent so much time together, he was able to then start to ask me if I had eaten or ensure that I was eating something. Also, up to this point, if you know anything about me, I love a good pizza. I had convinced him that I didn't like it because it was a fear food for me. Mm. And because of that, like, also, we would hang out in the afternoons. So I would be able to convince him that I'd eaten dinner before coming to his house. Or if I hadn't, I'd be like, sorry, I don't really like that. I'll just eat when I get home. And that's how I was able to kind of get around him knowing for a while. But after that, he was able to kind of pick apart, like, okay, what have you eaten? Or, you know, those kind of things. Yeah. And obviously through this time, to be in this headspace, I don't think you can be in the best health spiritually if you're in this kind of place. And I also think at that time I somehow simultaneously experienced feeling a little better than some of my friends in a Christian way, just because some friends were making decisions that I didn't love, and I was very hypocritical and judged them for those things in that point. And we're okay now, but it's never been the same since. But I know that came from them truly not like understanding the place that I was in, and me almost projecting my spiritual health onto the people around me. Also, this is my first real boyfriend, keep in mind at this point. And I'm only a senior in high school. I was a virgin. And in that Christian superiority complex, I would judge friends I knew for being sexually active. And I felt very strictly that I was not going to be that person. And I thought, man, you're crazy if you are that person. Like, how could you ever? I can't imagine that. But we all know I was a teenager, and teenagers are stupid. And so that didn't last very long. It wasn't a full jump into the deep end, but we definitely continued to push boundaries until we did eventually end up, I lost my virginity. Obviously, my parents did not know about this. Neither did his parents, but his parents were the least strict on. He wasn't allowed in my bedroom at all. And his parents were definitely boy parents and didn't care as much. So I think my mom turned an unconvinced blind eye. I think she knew but didn't want to know. And obviously there was some lying to her involved in that, as every teenager does. Not validating it, but just saying it's a typical experience. So we then came to college together, and in that process I had a roommate that was really homesick, which then allowed us to start spending the night together. And I wouldn't admit it at the time, but I think there was some sort of homesickness there because the only person I knew up here was him. And so he started spending the night. And because of that, I think I grew an unhealthy attachment to him being there. Because I was homesick, he became like it was a definite anxious attachment. And it came to the point around, I guess, January of freshman year. It got pretty bad to the point where if he was leaving my dorm, I was crying, like in the floor pretty bad. And yeah, just really not great in terms of how attached I was to him. But that I would also like to point out that that's because I was having sex with somebody who wasn't my husband, and that's not the way that God designed it. And my body was acting as if he was my husband, and I didn't want him to leave because I was doing things the wrong way. And my mental health was struggling because of it. And at the time, it was a complete mystery to me that I was anxious and sad and depressed, and why my body couldn't understand him leaving for 12 hours. It didn't occur to me that I could just stop living in sin to fix the problem I was having. And it got pretty bad, but also this is kind of the beginning point of when I started to take Christianity really seriously, because this was kind of my rock bottom moment of like, gosh, if there's any time, it's now. Like, I don't have a choice to be all in or not. And thankfully, I got really plugged into a small group my freshman year, which is how I know Emily, by the way. She's my small group leader. And I'm really thankful that I began to choose to come to church. And around January, it really started to matter to me personally. And this is the time that I actually started reading my Bible every day for the first time. And I actually started prioritizing my walk with God above everything, and started realizing that I did have my boyfriend as an idol, and that had to come to a stop, or I was going to be the primary victim of that. Like, I was only hurting myself in doing that. But now, okay, I guess I'm going to jump to like sophomore year, which is the past year of college. Throughout this time, me and Luke had stopped having sex for a few different times between both of our convictions. But ultimately, neither of us actually wanted to stop, and therefore never set any harsh boundaries. And the same things would happen again. The boundaries would get pushed and pushed and pushed until we were just living in the same lifestyle again. And I guess I'm trying to say that the conviction was there. It was just walked out for a short time and then kind of ignored again for another few months. And it was just a cycle. But in first semester of sophomore year, I started to have a really harsh conviction. And that's because I was watching a podcast. Well, actually, pause. Luke had moved into my apartment for a brief time because he was in a roommate switch, because he had a really trash roommate and needed to swap, but they didn't have a room available for him, and he refused to live with that roommate anymore. So he moved into my apartment. Did you know this? Oh, he moved into my apartment for like a week or something like that. And in that week, the conviction was so heavy that I heard a sentence in a podcast, and it like made me feel sick to my stomach. It was such harsh conviction, and I wanted to ignore it so badly. But my girl Jackie Hill Perry said, either God is the Lord of your life or he isn't, and there's no in between, and you don't get to compromise on what you either follow or what you don't follow. Oof. And it made me feel so sick to my stomach because he was asleep in the room behind me, and I couldn't wait on him to move out so that I could have that talk with him. I don't know why I didn't have it before he, anyways, doesn't really matter. But I ended up having that talk with him, and I also eventually had the conversation with him that ultimately it was going to be his job and his role to lead us spiritually. Because up until that point, I had been the main person bringing up the conviction of living that lifestyle. And in so many words, I gave an ultimatum of like, either you have to lead this or it's not going to work. for us to get married ever. And I'm not going to be the one holding up the boundaries. Mm-hmm. Like, you have to pull your weight. I feel like I'm dragging you spiritually. And we started successfully living a pure lifestyle for the first time. And we ended up getting engaged around Thanksgiving. And then throughout the time of us planning our wedding, we did have moments where we failed, obviously, because as any person does, you fail. But I think the real difference was that it wasn't like, oh, we failed, looks like we have to go back to like living in that sin again. We were able to be like, no, that doesn't define us, and that's not the lifestyle we're living. And so we were able to like continuously get back up, keep trying, move on. And we were able to figure out what our boundaries needed to be to prevent those things from happening. And I think it was also amazing for our relationship because Luke really began to see the value in leadership. And a lot of breakthrough conversations happened that I just didn't see coming from him, because my husband is a very laid back person. Like, he is not going to be the one thinking super in depth about anything. And he was, and it was super weird, but amazing. And we ultimately, I would say, successful in like living out a pure lifestyle, and it was great. And then we got married in May. And so currently, here I am, just living out the life, I guess, with my puppy that we got, and just kind of trying to figure it out as we go.
So a follow-up question I have would be, what does your spiritual life or walk look like now?
Oh yeah, that's great. Well, in not the best spot right this current moment. But I think that's because of so many lifestyle changes that what was once my 24/7 personal time is now, well, I now live with another person full time, which is really different. It's different than having a roommate for sure, because you're like constantly interacting with them. So figuring out alone time is difficult. And also a puppy that needs you every 10 seconds is a lot. So I'm figuring that out. But I would say on the upward trend. It's on the upward trend. It's not as bad as it ever was before. Since like past January, I've had ups and downs, but overall up.
Yeah.
It's just been the group of like finding out when my quiet time is, because I don't have the 3 hours I used to put into it a day, praying and reading the Bible, and I'll always miss that. But I think that there's also God has something different for this season, and I just have to figure that out. Yeah. So in a transition period, but good.
Abby loves the Lord.
Oh, that's very sweet.
That was the gist.
That's great.
I wanted to get conveyed is if y'all could be in a room with Abby at any point in life, it would be an honor and a blessing. But the girl bleeds sunshine. It's beautiful.
Okay. I made it through my entire testimony without crying.
It's beautiful, which I want to say.
All you had to do was tell an old person story, and you could have made me cry. You didn't have to go there.
Fair. No, but it's true. It's super true.
That's very sweet.
People, if listening, might not ever get that opportunity, so I needed that to be known. And I appreciate it. I know that this is hard. I get to do it too.
Yeah.
And so
I'm really excited for yours.
I know that it's hard, and I'm really grateful to hear it, and that we get to do this, and that others do too.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So I guess our next episode will be your testimony.
I guess so.
The extended version.
Yeah.
I think I've heard most of it, but I'm excited to hear the things I haven't heard.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Hopefully, someone out there can resonate with part of your testimony and can get a little hope too, that it doesn't have to end. It can keep going.
Yeah.
And hopefully you guys will tune in for mine.
Yeah. I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah.
Bye, friend.
Bye.